Okay, so tonight we're going to be exploring the subject of bias in women's health care. And what I'm going to be looking at is the external, of course, here. And I just wanted to point out the fact that with the external, there's always an internal component. And I think it's for us personally to reflect and learn and walk away, get rid of the biases that we have on this subject. You may not even know we have them. And this short little talk will mainly just focus on the areas of healthcare and what the biases are in there. Okay, with that being said, what is the bias in women's health research? Okay, so the bias in women's health research is basically in two broad categories. The first broad category would be about the bias about women as producers of research, the researchers, the scientists, the doctors, that end of the bias. And the other end of the bias would be the subject of women in the scientific research and the bias that goes in that end. And a lot of this study is coming from an online library. It's called the Wiley Open Access Journal. And so when you have these resources for knowledge, all these articles that are published have to go under full peer review, which simply means that they're reviewed at least twice or by two different suitable or qualified experts. So these aren't just one-off articles without having people that really know what's going on in the area of the subject, going over them and vetting them. So with that said, what is the inequality in women's health? Well, as we know in our movement, gender equality is the subject of the hour. And so the startling fact comes right off the bat is that women spend more than 25% of their lives in debilitating health than men, 25% more than men do. And this is according to the World Economic Forum and the McKinsey Health Institute. The women's health gap includes a persistent data gap and women being underdiagnosed for certain conditions compared to men. And this is really up-to-date data. It was put out February 27th of this year. And so my first bullet point here is that women spend 25% more time in debilitating life. Now, what does that actually mean? Okay, so when we talk about women, we're speaking about real people like your mother or your daughter, your sister, a spouse, a coworker, these people that are in our lives. And so the debilitating health means a significant decrease in overall quality of life, potentially affecting daily activities, their independence, the mental well-being. They increasingly rely on more healthcare and, in some cases, a decreased mobility and limitations in pursuing goals and interest in life. There's also financial implications from loss of work to bills piling up. So it overall can drastically impact one's ability to enjoy life to its fullest. That's basically a huge amount of time, 25% more. All right, so even today, women remain broadly underrepresented medical literature, according to a study in 2022 in Women's Health Reports. And get this, there's also misogynistic attitudes still remain. While the United States National Institute of Health in 2016 implemented a policy requiring researchers to consider sex as a variable in the biomedical research, the results were mixed. The number of studies included women did noticeably increase after the policy was launched. So at least there was efforts being made here in this. And we'll talk about some of those efforts later down in this little presentation. Okay, however, in 2019, the bibliometric analysis, and that's a really giant word, bibliometric, I had to look it up. It says it's a rigorous way of analyzing large volumes of data. And you can imagine in medical studies, there is a large amount of data. We'll see here real quickly. Okay, in this analysis, it showed a majority of more than 700 medical studies. What do? They failed to analyze the resulting data by sex, limiting the usefulness. So they're cutting out half of the world, basically, by only focusing on males. Okay, so in 2019, almost 7 million people, second bullet point, 7 million people almost were in a study in Denmark, and they found that women were diagnosed with hundreds of health conditions when they were on average 4 years older than men. So it took 4 years longer to come up with a diagnosis for women than men. And by the way, just so everyone knows, this little circle with a little plus sign below it is the medical term for females. And I have it, the male is a circle with a little arrow coming off at about 2 o'clock. That's for male, in case there's somebody that doesn't understand what those, I just use those abbreviations to get the stuff on the board because there's a lot of information I was trying to write down. Anyways, so in 2019, this study with 7 million people in Denmark found that 4 years later, women were being diagnosed. And then for diabetes, it was 4.5 years later. But while cancer was being diagnosed in women, they were only 2.5 years older. But every single thing was taking longer for women to be diagnosed. The researchers surmised that a combination of genetics and environment could be at play, but that gender bias might also be partially responsible for the differences. Okay, so the lead author in this study says, and it's interesting thought, he adds in that men generally have a tendency to get to the doctor later, and I think we can all agree on that. So presumably the difference in onset would even be larger than the study shows. Okay, so minding the women's healthcare gap. The same year, that was in 2019, the British journalist Carolyn Perez published a book entitled Invisible Women: Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. And what this book did is it really lifted the lid on women's health data gap. Men were outnumbered in this 3-to-1 in 31 medical trials for congestive heart failure over a 15-year period was one of the examples. And so this is the next bullet point here, that men were outnumbered 3-to-1. That CHF is congestive heart failure trials over a 15-year period. So you can see there's not an equality there at all, 3-to-1. Excuse me. Okay, so moving on. For millennium, medicine has functioned on the wrong assumption that male bodies can represent the whole of humanity. It was told in the UK Evening Standard, and I'm quoting, "As a result, we have a huge historical data gap when it comes to female bodies. Women are dying and the medical world is complicit. It needs to wake up." So in the following year, COVID-19 pandemic shows up, and that disrupts healthcare in general throughout the globe. And women, of course, are disproportionately affected on this. So in Davos, Switzerland, 2024, when is this? That's this year. The World Economic Forum launched the Global Alliance for Women's Health. And what it was designed to do is to change how women's health is funded and prioritized in order to close the gap in women's health. Okay, so the women's health gap, here's an interesting statistic, equates to, and it's because they're talking about the whole gap of the planet, 75 million years of lost life due to poor health or early death each year. Closing the gap would give the 3.9 million women in the world today an extra 7 healthy days a year, or on average about 500 days in a lifetime. So it's almost a year and a half. Now, if there's any questions, just speak up. I'm here. Not only that, but it could also benefit the globe economically by $1 trillion by 2024 from fewer deaths and health conditions and greater capacity for women to contribute to the economy and society. The World Economic Forum and the McKinsey Health Institute have released a new insight report. It's entitled "Closing the Women's Health Gap, a $1 trillion opportunity to improve lives and economies." So in 2020, here's my next bullet point, only 1% of healthcare research and innovation was invested in female-specific conditions beyond oncology. And that's according to the McKinsey report. So this is a startling fact. 1% of healthcare research and innovation invested in specifically looking at women's conditions or diseases. That's just a drop in the bucket. It's amazing to me. But I believe this is going to be changing. It has to change if we're going to advance in treatments and diagnosis and the such. Okay, closing the women's health gap means increasing diagnosis of women's health conditions. Diagnosing, you can't treat a disease unless you have the proper diagnosis. And to me, if you really want to be a doctor, it's can he diagnose? There's some doctors that are really good at this, and there's some that are not as good as others, let's just say. And so what we're going to look at now is 5 different examples of major conditions and diseases that have been underdiagnosed. And the first one is the #1 cause of death in really the world. Does anybody know what that might be, the #1 cause of death? I'll tell you that 2,000 people in the United States approximately die every day of this disease alone. Anybody have a guess?
Heart disease.
Heart disease?
You
Yeah.
nailed it. Heart disease, followed by cancer. So women in the UK are around 1/3 less likely to receive a coronary angiogram, which allows doctors to see the narrowing of the blood vessels and blockages after a heart attack and before heart attacks. And this is one of the main ways that they can see blockages which is a heart attack. When you have a blockage in the blood flow going to the heart will actually die in that spot of the heart. Okay, a published study in the Lancet Regional Health Europe found that women were more likely to die after being admitted to the hospital with a severe heart attack, but they were less likely to be prescribed medications to prevent future heart attacks, such as statins. And most of us know a statin is a drug that lowers your cholesterol, which lowers plaque buildup in the arteries and veins, which cause the heart attacks. Previous research has found women were 50% more likely than men to be given an incorrect diagnosis following a heart attack. And, you know, when I was working, which is now been like 5 years ago, we were really focusing and concentrating more on the differences in women and men in the symptoms of heart attacks. Because if you had a patient, I remember this one instance, there was a patient up on the floor and they have these things. It's not exactly when you call a code on a patient, the patient isn't dying, but the patient is looking like there's an imminent problem. And so they call in experts from the emergency department, the laboratory, x-ray, respiratory, which was me, and of course, nursing and a doctor. And they would go over the case, you know, to try and pull this patient away from a serious event. And one of the things that was being taught was that women having symptoms, let's just say flu-like symptoms, can be actually having a heart attack or about to have a heart attack, where you would see a man and you're like flu-like symptoms, this is nothing. You're looking for jaw pain or left arm pain or crushing chest pain, those kinds of things. So it's widely different diseases. Symptoms for this disease. And thankfully at that point, it was really becoming more of a thing to pay attention to these different kinds of ways a heart condition was being presented in women. Okay, so this Dr. Soya Naharian, he's a medical associate director of the BHF, which is the British Heart Association, and a consultant cardiologist, told the Times, quoting, "Deep-rooted inequalities mean women are underdiagnosed, undertreated, and underserved." So it's really important. Okay, that was the first one that's big flag. The next one is endometriosis. Yeah, endometriosis. Okay. And that's referred to as the missing disease. It has largely been ignored in government policy and research funding globally because it's still so little is known about it, and it's because it's so little is known about it, it's very much underdiagnosed. Okay, globally though, it's a huge amount of people because it's 10% of women of reproductive age. But in the US, for example, only 2 out of 10 cases are diagnosed, with a diagnosis taking more than 7 years. 7 years, get that. I mean, can you imagine? And then it goes on to say it's even longer in Black women. So there's a lot to be worked on for endometriosis. Okay, there's a famous, supposedly, I don't know, I'm not so much into filmmakers and activists on this end, but excuse me, there's an American filmmaker, lawyer, and activist, Shannon Cohen, and she recently directed a documentary. I actually posted this, a TED Talk from her on the Big Bible Study. It's called Below the Belt, and it was all about to shine a light on this same condition. And she spoke to the World Economic Forum Radio Davis podcast about her own experience. And she has a little paragraph here about her experience. And it goes like this. Cohen had her first painful symptoms of the condition when she was 16 years old. But then there was this yawning 13-year gap not being believed, imagine, actually by healthcare providers, being told my symptoms were in my head or part of just being a woman, or that she was just exaggerating. So you can see that women aren't taken seriously, especially when they don't know a lot about conditions. It's always, well, give her Valium or something. She's got a head condition. She's got some other problem. Okay, going on to the third one is autism. And it's quite prevalent. Around 3 times as many boys are diagnosed with autism as girls. And this is usually boys and girls. And we know in our movement that girls, that means prepubescent. So it's young, very young people. So the girls are oftentimes diagnosed later, or not at all even. Get that. And this all can lead to mental health condition or problems in adulthood, according to the research. So the medical gender bias, Kathy has a question.
Can you hear me enough?
Can you hear Kathy? Anyone?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I just wanted to say something that I just forgot. About women and,
Autism?
no, you went too fast, I couldn't get it out. What was the previous one? Endometriosis.
Yeah.
Okay, well, forget about that noise there. I will, when I get it back in my head, I'll try to retain it and say it, but it absolutely jumped out of my head,
Okay.
so I'm sorry.
Okay, raise your hand again and we'll break
It has
down
to do with women and
endometriosis.
healthcare in general.
7 years to be diagnosed.
Go ahead with your-
While you're thinking of your point, Kathy, I'll talk about my point that I wanted to talk about, and then we just went on. But so David, when you were talking about the women just being given Valium, it made me realize how undervalued women are.
Yeah.
Like men, they would want men to be functional. So we're going to give you something. But
Yeah.
women, let's make them as least out of our way as possible, because we don't need them. We don't need the hassle.
Uh-huh. Yeah. That's a shining example. Thank you, Alyssa.
They're taught in residency to call, especially older women, whiny women too. I heard that from a doctor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's nothing we can do for them. They're just whiny women.
Yeah.
in many cases. So they make up something like anxiety. Say, here's an antidepressant, which I experienced a couple times when I was younger and when I was older.
Right.
Both times I didn't bother with it.
Yeah. That's smart. Okay, any other comments or experiences? If not, autism. So we were talking about how boys are diagnosed. No, Kathy thought of it quick.
I remember, okay. I'm not sure what I was reading. Maybe it was in the media broadcast, but they learn only on male cadavers. This is where they get, all these, wonderful diagnoses and things like that, is they're using male cadavers and not female cadavers. Now, whether that's changed are not, I can't remember from what I read, but that was one criticism, was they used male cadavers and not women. So therefore, of course, it's all skewed toward men. And, it's taken years to find out something, though I know about it. So anyways, that was my comment, that they're using male cadavers, and that's why they don't know anything about women.
Okay, thank you for that. Fact, factoid, yeah. Autism. Okay, so let's see.
Oh, I've read a thing about autism too.
Okay, want to share that before we do this? Before you
Well,
forget?
yeah, before I forget,
Come on.
that an autism in girls is because, because you have to understand words in autism, but they mask. And, masking means they don't know how to, they have very poor social skills and social understanding because of the way their brain works. They need a world to themselves, God needs to make another planet and put the autistic people there, because they'd understand each other, but autistic people don't relate well to this world. But they found that girls can mask so much easier than boys, that's the reason they don't get diagnosed until later, because they're good maskers.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay,
sorry.
thank you, Kathy. She must have been reading my notes because that was my next point.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I gave you
No, that's good that
the
she-
thing. I don't know.
She's cooperating with this. Yeah, what they're masking is, here's what the way they explained it was that the girls, and some women, but mainly it's girls because this happens early, they begin to, let's just say, study culture. They study other girls and see how are they acting, what are they reacting to, what is their mannerisms, the way they talk and the way they move their hands and all these kinds of things. And so they begin to mimic this so that they can blend in, right? Even though they're not naturally, predisposed to acting the way that maybe their peers do in a lot of circumstances. And so, with autism, there can be things like they make funny sounds. And so they have to cope with that by not, or trying to refrain from it. And repetitive motions, some of them do those things, and they have to consciously begin to stop themselves from these things. This is part of their masking process. So when they do this, what does it do to them? Well, it causes burnout, let's just say, and it's high anxiety, if at the worst, or maybe at the best, it's just plain old being anxious a lot. And this can lead to just plain exhaustion from these people. It's no joke of a condition, actually. And I think the masking, of course, everybody wants to get along with, society, and they don't want to stand out like a sore thumb. So like Kathy stated, they do get diagnosed later. Okay, so there's a quote here that I'm going to read from Karen Saprito, and it says that because females often mask and defy stereotypically autistic presentations, individuals and families must endlessly educate others and advocate for themselves or their children to receive the treatments, supports, and accommodations they deserve. So it's all on them. Society doesn't jump right in and help these people at all. So this person, Amira Guebi, she's a project lead of the Women's Health Initiative at the World Economic Forum, and she believes still more research is needed into why women's medical needs are not being met before we can achieve gender equality in health. So goes without saying that more research needs to be done on this condition. And quoting again from her, it says, every woman should be able to receive quality care when and where she needs it. We will only be able to achieve this once we examine the state of, excuse me, the women's health gap, and then identifying the biggest disparities to direct strategies and policies towards better women's health outcomes. Have a drink. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to go on to the fourth disease that was noted in this study, and that's ADHD. Okay, so it's a neurobiological condition that frequently occurs with autism and is similarly misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed in females. So this is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. In the United States, less than 1% of women have a diagnosis of ADHD, but the number is growing rapidly according to the research. So things are changing in this regard, thankfully. In 2023, analysis of a data set found the rate of diagnosis among women aged 23 to 49, so this is not very young, almost doubled between 2020 and 2022. So just 2 years. And I have to think that this has something to do with the pandemic. I'm not sure what to put my finger on, but the study said that supports finding that women tend to be diagnosed later in life than men. As with autism, ADHD symptoms present differently in women, and historically, research focuses on boys with the condition. The study said the gap between women and men in terms of diagnosis is closing, though. So another quote here says, while males remain more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than females, the disparity has decreased over the past 12 years. The ratio of males to females diagnosed with ADHD decreased from nearly 5-fold during that time, from males being 133% more likely to be diagnosed, 133% more likely than females, to down to 28% more likely to be diagnosed than with ADHD in 2022. So women are finally getting on the radar with the doctors and the researchers when it comes to ADHD. Okay, the last one we're going to talk about is autoimmune conditions. And this is like the third most prevalent disease category after heart disease and cancer. And these conditions or diseases would be like lupus, psoriasis, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, and thyroid diseases. So that's quite a few different serious diseases and conditions. So women account for the majority, get this, majority, 80% with autoimmune disease. But it takes on average, how many years do you think on average for them to get diagnosed with this? Anybody want to venture a guess?
7 years.
I was going to say 8.
Kathy says 20, Linda says 7, and Penny says 8. So it's better than all of those. It's only 5 years. Yeah, but 5 years, think about that. I mean, if you got multiple sclerosis or arthritis or thyroid, lupus, all these 5 years to get diagnosed, what do these people go through? We know personally in our home that it takes a long time to, especially something that's not been, widely studied, let's just say, or is more rare. And these aren't very rare diseases. Believe me.
Is there a particular age group, like especially MS, of women that tend to get this, and the other autoimmune conditions, or,
Not-
age range?
Yeah, you're asking if there is?
Yeah, an age range, because I've heard something myself about it.
Okay, well, maybe you could share, because in this article, I didn't run across that. It just was saying that it was 80, that what jumped out at me, that was 80% women, and then you think that, wow, women are understudied and women are under, taken seriously, all these things. And now here it's 80% of the people are coming down with these things. What's going on? Well, in the next paragraph, there's a reason for this. But do you have anything to share? about that?
Postmenopausal is when they
Oh.
come down with the rheumatoid arthritis and the MS and all that, because that came up in my own research,
Uh-huh. Okay.
previous. Yeah. It's the hormone fluctuations that are kind of involved in that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, and I don't know how this fits in with that, but there must be some trigger with the hormones, because the scientists at Stanford University have discovered something that is only in women, and it's called the molecule Exist. That's an X and IST. And this molecule is only found in women, okay? So these scientists discovered this thing, and I was trying to, with my own limited medical knowledge, figure out what is this, right? And I'll just read what they got to say about it, because I got a little bit out of it, but nothing that I can really kind of explain very well. So what this Exist molecule that's only in women is, it triggers a chemical response that is a hallmark for autoimmune disease and could explain why conditions are more prevalent in women. It's something on, okay, the X is like, okay, women are XX and men, are XY, but that there's the whole range, that's not everybody. That's just what standard medicine kind of is putting out there. So the X is the XX of female chromosomes, and it has to do with sort of like, I'll just say in my mind, like a coating that goes over top of part of the chromosomes, and it shields it from doing its thing, let's just say, being what it could be, its full potential. And so when that happens, somehow it triggers these autoimmune diseases. So there's something in there that it's shielding the person from, being able to fight off or not get any of these diseases. It's pretty cutting edge medicine that's going on right now with this stuff. Okay, so let's see. Well, okay, so once you understand these things, you got to understand the disease, the diagnosis, to find out what's going on. You need the research to do it, so that you can do what? Develop therapies, medications, early detection, prevention. There's all these things to fight these diseases, but it all comes down to research and who's getting researched. Is it males or females, or is it both? Okay. So this leads us to the next thing, because the both should be getting better now, because what's happening to solve these inequalities, okay? So there's a law mandating the inclusion of women in medical research, and guess how old this law is now? Anybody want to venture a guess on this one?
31 years?
Say again?
31 years?
You must have been reading my notes.
Yeah. No, it's on the board.
Exactly. So that's why the board's there. Kind of impress these things out of our minds. Yeah. So this article was written in 2023, June. So it's not quite a year old, really close. But it was a 30-year anniversary on June 10th. And Congress, the United States Congress, passage of the National Institute of Health, NIH Revitalization Act, which requires the inclusion of women in federally funded research. And I thought, oh, this is a great thing. And then I said, oh, federally funded. So that means that there are people that aren't getting federal dollars, they could leave this out. So that's my first point up there. And I underlined the requiring in red. Okay, so as a result, progress has been made in advancing women's health over the last 31 years, but there are still knowledge gaps, especially in disease disorders in which women are disproportionately affected. Guess what? Some big ones too, like lung cancer, Alzheimer's, rheumatoid arthritis. So there's gaps that are a long way from being filled. Okay, I'm going to be quoting again from Nicole Wojtowicz. She's a PhD doctor and a research assistant, professor of medical social sciences. So medical social sciences at Northwestern University in Feinberg School of Medicine. She studies gender parity or gender equality in research. And she said biomedical research still lags far behind clinical research. Okay, we could guess that, right? Quoting again, even though women are included in clinical research, biomedical scientists still routinely fail to analyze data by sex and gender. This is a stage when it's vitally important before drugs and therapies can even be developed. Going on, when we fail to analyze data by sex or gender, we are leaving half our knowledge about human health and disease on the table. We have no way of knowing if certain treatments or therapies work better in one sex or the other. And if so, how can we tailor them to improve the health for all people? Okay, she also raises the fact that there's economic concerns with this whole thing to the actually the American taxpayer. Okay, talking about this legislation, was in response. Why did they have it? Because it was in response to decades of exclusionary practices in which women of reproductive age were underrepresented, or, and get this, in certain cases were banned from participating in clinical research. They just said, no, we're not going to put women in there. You know, it just seems so odd that I know that they're trying to focus on something and you have to mirror, you know, as we say in the movement, get the noise out of it. But the noise in this case is the thing that needs to be looked at. And that's not only men being researched, but females also. Okay, so this was mandated, which turns out to be a good thing. All right. To this day, it ensures that the nation's research resources adequately addressing the health and well-being of women are addressed. Okay, next bullet point. Women's health is often underfunded. Okay. Second bullet point down, women's underfunded. According to the report by Women's Health Access Matters, only 12% of federal funding on Alzheimer's disease goes towards women-specific research. 12%. If this investment is doubled, the return on investment would get this, be 224%. So for just a little bit more money, they get a whole big payback on this. Okay, quoting again, this Dr. Wojtowicz, she says, investing in women's health is an economic imperative. It goes beyond just a scientific issue. Lastly, she suggests that women are key to advancing women's health research. So women need to be supported that are fighting to get in positions to not only do the research, but as we're going to see shortly, to get into senior roles where they have influence to help direct and fight for this type of research funding and research. All right, gender inequality and pay gaps persist. So here's another issue. The WHO, the World Health Organization, had a news release March 8th of 2023, just over a year ago. And this says that despite the incredible contributions, and if you know anything about hospitals, you'll know that women basically are the majority of the healthcare workers. Incredible contribution in the healthcare by the women in saving lives every day. Women often face challenges including unequal pay and limited career advancements. Currently, women in healthcare sector only hold 25% of the senior roles, earning 24% less than men, facing a larger pay gap than other sectors. So in the key senior roles where a lot of the decisions are made, is 1 in 4 are women, and they're paid basically 24%, let's just say 1/4% less. Okay, going on with the pay gaps that persist. Gender wage gap in medicine demands attention and remediation. Women currently make up 47.5% of the US medical school graduate, yet studies show a persistent wage gap between men and women physicians across nearly all specialities and geographies. After adjusting for hours worked, for years of the profession, for medical specialties, one study found at 24 public United States medical schools, women's salaries were on average of 8% less, or around $20,000 less than men's, a difference that was present in all faculty ranks. And that was put out by the NIH in April of 2019. Okay, so let's see, do I have a bullet point for that? The 25%, holding only 25% of senior roles in healthcare, and women earning 24% less than men. Okay, so the good news is what? Things are slowly changing. And the not so good news is that things aren't changing quite fast enough for a lot of people. They'll be dead and in their grave before things happen, because people are dying all the time, as we've seen earlier. So reviewing here, we want to look at women spend 25%, that's a huge amount of time, for more in debilitating life because of what? Biases in women's health. About 7 million women were diagnosed an average of 4 years later than men. Bias in women's health. In 2019 study, men outnumbered women 3-to-1 in trials for congestive heart failure over a 15-year period. In 2020, only 1% of healthcare research and innovation invested in women-specific conditions beyond oncology. All these are biases in women's health. We've talked about them. So you can see the inequalities are pay inequality, research inequality, research funding inequality, diagnosis inequality, and medical literature. There's gaps there. So what can we do about this? I think we need to be, as people in the movement, speak up when we go to the doctor, questioning them on things. And that's not always going to go over so great. But when it goes over good, you know you have a good doctor. And when they get bowed up and are fighting you, you may need a second opinion. I've seen this going on with my own wife. That's why I say these things. So try to make things better in our little corners about all we can do. And this concludes my short study. And if anybody has questions or comments, please speak up now. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome, Melissa.
I think about every woman, I think about every woman in the, that I know in the movement has experienced medical bias.
Yeah.
And sexism and dismissal, and not just from male doctors, some female doctors too.
That's true.
And you really do have to be your own advocate.
Yes.
I've had my own experiences where it's taken a couple of years to figure something out,
Uh-huh.
just because, you know, well, the results don't show anything. I'm like, yeah, well, we need to go deeper
Yeah.
and
Keep
try
digging.
and find out why.
Mhm.
So it really is, I think, a systemic problem also with maybe the system of teaching and training doctors. And
Yeah.
maybe their schedules are too, you know what I mean? They have 10 minutes with a patient. They're not, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just really a messed up thing. But you can find some good ones occasionally. And in the meantime, you just got to be your own advocate. Thanks,
That's a fact.
David.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I read more medical journal information than my doctors. I mean, you know, over the years. Yeah, I literally in my chart, I sent the 2 latest statements from the NIH and NAMS on menopause and HRT to my primary care physician.
Good.
She ignores it.
Yeah. You can't help that.
Yeah, she asked for it, you know, and I told her, and I'm like, okay, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, you know, go on and parrot the usual, you know,
Yeah.
garbage that you were saying. Ignore whatever it says on there.
Yeah.
It's
Ignore
not
the
until,
fact.
and there have been 3 other things that have come out just this year: Green Journal, OBGYN, and Menopause Journal. It's not until a law is passed where
Yeah.
they say that doctors must adhere to this and must be trained. It is optional.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have a whole lot of time. And it will take, and this is from good sources, another generation.
Oh, yeah. No.
But at the same time, there's already backlash, and it's because of money.
Yeah.
And it can be all women involved in that. I just found out today. It's all women involved in the backlash.
No, that's our,
That's sick.
yeah.
But it's about money. It's about keeping women's problems psychological as opposed to, you know, physical and biological. Because money can be made through cognitive, what do you call it? Oh, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
This was just a little snippet of something I heard in a video today. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Follow the money. Yeah.
I want to tell you something, Linda. As I was researching, looking for infectious disease doctor, I came across an OBGYN who does hormone replacement therapy. Said it right there on her name, what her services she provided. And I was like so excited to see that, and want to tell you that there's somebody, at least in, well, it's a big area. This company, healthcare company here called Baycare, is huge, but somewhere in the Pinellas, my county, there's a female doctor, OBGYN, who does hormone replacement therapy. So I wanted to
It doesn't always matter though. They may still come up with it happened to me twice. They may still come up with a reason to deny you treatment of anything, of anything.
Don't
I
burn
mean,
my-
because like I said, they're not reading the latest research, medical journals, the latest, statements from,
Right, yeah.
big publication, big, entities.
Yeah.
They're not. We have to do that ourselves. You got
Right.
ADHD, you must research it.
Yeah,
And a long time, whatever it is you're suffering from, you must do the research. Because then how will you know if what you're hearing from that doctor, any doctor, is true? And
True.
you will get gaslighted
Yeah.
otherwise.
yeah. So I just looked at the chat for the first time. Thank you, Bob, Penny, Mavis. The first one says women can present with different symptoms when it comes to heart attacks. True. When many women present to the hospital, the bias is that she is most likely experience a panicking attack. I can see that, and I've seen that happen more than once. And then when they do an EKG and see that there's an ST elevation or something like this, there's like, oh, wow, all surprised. And I like this next quote, an Ellen White quote. It looks like false science is one of the agencies that Satan used in the heavenly courts. It is used by him today. The false assertions that he made to the angels, his subtle scientific theories, seduce many of them from their loyalty. Yeah, false science. Nothing's new under the sun, for sure. Yeah. All right, thank you all. Anyone else?
David,
Yes. Bob.
hey, I just wanted to share that I know that we're all looking at it, hopefully seeing that things have progressed since since decades ago. Things did progress in a right direction to help women find some equality, even though we're far from it still. And yet at the same time, we're looking through rose-colored glasses if we think that it's going to continue to improve for women, because we know that the backlash is already going on and things are actually getting worse again in many areas for women. And yeah, so things are not going to continue to get better, unfortunately, the way we're seeing it prophetically.
Yes. Thank you, Bob. Okay, with that, I'll close in prayer. Lord in heaven, we thank you, Lord, for helping us, Lord, to understand where we are in history, helping us see the truths that there is great bias, not only in the world, but we have to guard against our own selves. And we ask that your Holy Spirit will continue convicting us and showing us where we can be cleansed from these things, Lord. We thank you for the soon coming Sabbath hours and pray for abundant rest and refreshing, Lord. And I thank you for this time we spent together tonight. And I pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome. Carol, good to see you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome, everyone.
We do closing prayer. Anybody
Yeah,
want to
you-
do closing prayer?
Do you want to do another one?
Or unless somebody else would, I'm putting it out there.
David just did.
Oh, okay. I'm with it tonight. That's Friday. Okay.
Oh,
You can never pray too much.
No.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay. All right.
Good night.
Night.
good night, all.
Night all.
Good night, everybody. Happy Sabbath.
Yeah.
Happy Sabbath.
Peace. Yeah. Hmm.